Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am really embarrassed when people read my bio, so. Okay, so the story tonight begins in Auburn, in central Western Sydney, about 13 years ago. And we were faced with a dilemma. How do we make human rights real and relevant to people who may not necessarily have to think about human rights every day? So if you know Auburn, it's a hub of diversity. 57% of the population is born overseas, 71% speak a language other than English, and 27% of people had arrived in Australia in the last 5 years. At one point, Auburn had the highest number of people seeking asylum in the country. So as a local government worker at the time, we heard two very different views. The stories of resilience and challenges that people who were seeking asylum in our community were experiencing. We also heard the dehumanising portrayal in the media and the political rhetoric, which resulted in policies that denied people of their human rights. We also knew that our local community and across Australia, many people didn't think about human rights every day. From waking up in the morning with electricity, having a shower, brushing your teeth, eating a meal with family, going to school or university, travelling to another country for a holiday, living without fear that any part of your identity would be persecuted. We knew that for many in our community, though, they were not enjoying their human rights. We thought, how do we connect to this concept of human rights? Make it real for people who don't have to think about it every day. How do we, and the context was, the media was having this negative portrayal. And to be completely honest, we were also angry. How do we channel this anger that we had of the negative portrayal of our community, of our own, my personal experience, my family's experience? How do we channel that anger? So we heard many times that from our community that what was being portrayed was not who they were, was not their experience. So we sat down and we thought, the answer to this dilemma starts with people. So we set out on a journey. We started to talk. We talked to our community, who themselves were seeking asylum, who had arrived earlier as refugees, who had formed grassroots organisations, and the services who worked with and for them. Together, we embarked on a journey to put the human in human rights. We developed a project and we said, how do we let people know what the reality of your experience is? We worked over 4 months to develop the project. Together we brainstormed what we were trying to achieve, what key messages, including specific human rights we wanted to highlight. We looked at how long it would take us to deliver this project. We looked at who would be imparting this information to visitors. We looked at the selection criteria, recruitment process. We had looked in the evening for the community leaders, in the daytime for services. We partnered with the University of New South Wales, and 140 local community members came and shared with us what they wanted people to know. Over 4 months, we had communities from Afghanistan, Bosnia, Iran, Iraq, Somalia, Sierra Leone, Sudan, and many, many more take part in this project. And what was the result? The result was the refugee camp in My Neighbourhood. The project simulates the journey of someone seeking asylum, leaving their home, travelling through many countries, arriving in Australia. The project included the experience of seeking safety, being put in detention, but also being released into the community, arriving in Australia on a humanitarian visa, and also the challenges experienced once you resettle in a new country. What we ended up with was a community education project which aimed to raise awareness about the reality of the refugee journey. Tour guides who were former refugees guided people along the tour. Throughout the tour, visitors discovered the stories, the experiences that many of our local residents had experienced. the project aimed to not just build understanding of human rights, but also responsibilities. We wanted to provide accurate information about who is a refugee, who is a person seeking asylum, but the focus was on the reality. So tour guides shared their real experiences, and it provided an opportunity for people who have never met someone from a refugee background to ask questions. All those curly questions that they've never had a chance to ask, they had the chance to meet someone and ask them directly. We knew that one aspect of advocacy is raising awareness of an issue. So our audience was our first, it was our local community, and it became broader than that. By taking people on a tour and hearing directly from people who had lived it, who could share their personal stories, challenge preconceived ideas, dispel myths, but also foster mutual respect and understanding. A key part of the project was connecting people from refugee backgrounds with people who were not refugees. It meant that people were able to not only hear directly, but then they had the facts. They had to make a choice what they would do with that information that they didn't have before. So the format of this project was simple. In the consultation, the community said we need to explain why people flee their homes. So it starts off with an introduction. Who's a refugee? Who's an asylum seeker? How many are there in the world? Where do they come from? Where do they go to? We go through the process of fleeing and trying to cross the border. We then experience what life is like living in a refugee camp, living in a city, going on a boat journey, being placed in detention, arriving in Australia, and then the journey ends and participants get a chance to reflect on what that experience was like for them. Along this journey, at the start of the journey, they had to write down 5 things they would take with them. They only had a minute to write down 5 things. It's not safe, you have to leave right now. What 5 things would you take? And at the end of the journey, they had to reflect, what do they have left? What do they take with them? And what is left? The tours were tailored for primary school, high school, for adults who are working with refugees, for university students. For our community, it was also really important for us to have a celebration day. The community said, yes, we want people to hear how hard things have been, but we want them to see us happy. We want to see joy. We want people to see us celebrating and interacting with our culture. So we had a celebration day on the weekend where communities would have interactive activities, kite making, henna, food stalls, activities for kids. And what would happen was the kids who came to the tours during the week would bring their families on the weekend. They were moved. They met somebody who had impacted them, and they want their family members to meet them. So throughout the project, we evaluated the impact it had on visitors. We evaluated every year there was an evaluation. We had a 5-year impact evaluation. And barring COVID, this year is the 10th year. We're just in the final stages of evaluating the impact, the 10th year impact of the project. And every year, the impact is the same. For school students, we had over 10,800 school students participate in the past 10 years from 113 schools. Overwhelmingly, the school students said it's the personal stories of the tour guides, the humans who they met, that impacted them, hearing directly from people about their experiences, about the rights that they were easily able to access, but the tour guides at some point were not, or still could not. The simulation aspect of crossing the border. For professionals who are working with refugees, very similar. The impact the greatest impact were hearing directly from people who had experienced the journey themselves, being able to ask questions and look at how they could improve their practice when working with refugees. For professionals, it was clear that at the beginning, they thought they knew a lot, and at the end, they realised they actually didn't know as much as they thought they did. Now for tour guides. We employed over 207 tour guides in the past 10 years from 31 different backgrounds. The tour guides were the core of the project. The project would not have happened without them. Tour guides shared so much of their journey. They answered questions from the audience. They facilitated discussions. And they were the ones who put the human in the human rights. Their storytelling and lived experience allowed visitors to connect with the refugee journey. And the evaluation showed not only did they have an impact on people, but the impact on tour guides was their ability to impact the visitors. So what I meant by that is the tour guides felt that having that audience to be able to speak about their journey so people could hear exactly what life was like, what their journey was like, that it was the most impactful part of being part of this project for them. From school kids up to adults, they enjoyed sharing to an active audience who was listening and wanted to be there. There were other benefits, and this was deliberate. In how it was designed, the recruitment process was a simple recruitment process. It was an EOI, simple EOI. We focused on the skill that you needed, which was to be able to speak. And if you couldn't, we provided training to help you to do that. For many guides, it was their first job in Australia. And we all know the barriers to employment for people who are new to Australia. The local work experience was essential to gaining ongoing employment. Guides cited increase in confidence, gaining friends, and the chance to share what was important to them. So I'll end with what I started with. How do you put the human in human rights? You put people at the centre. The people who've experienced it, you put them at the centre, and that's how you put the human in human rights. Thank you.